Hello guys, and welcome to my video about LS draft philosophy, the implications I think it has on the competitive state of League of Legends, and the direction that the league might be heading into in the future. I'm recording this video in early 2022, and I'm making it as a sort of time capsule for people to look back on uh, if they question themselves which direction League will head into in the future seasons from now on, as well if they ask themselves how they can draft more effectively or which theoretical baseline they can use for good drafts or drafts that can give them an edge over their opponent, and the approach they should take if they head into a game as players as well as coaches. Um, the reason I am showing two of LS videos and have them as my sources for the content I'm displaying here is that I am a huge supporter of the ideas he presents in them concerning color schemes, fitting and matching champions, as well as the idea that you can basically never leave a certain theme, but still outdraft your opponent and get a massive draft edge by just playing defensively and using in-game strategies that allow you to not interact with the enemy as much as possible, which is definitely not the state of competitive League of Legends right now. The state of competitive League of Legends in the best regions right now is very high pace, very high tempo, with a lot of early aggression champions like Lee Sin, and engage supports and mid laners that can just shove and move all the time. However, we did see a lot of Victor and Corki early season, which is shifting again now. But there are rarely a lot of flex picks like G2 displayed in 2019 right now, which I find very confusing. And let me just start with saying I don't support everything LS is saying in his videos. This is not a sort of fanboy video. I'm trying to give an objective view over his draft philosophy, and I think this philosophy is a very useful philosophy when it comes to innovation, as I already mentioned. I think that this idea is very concise when you apply it correctly. I just think a lot of players in gold, plat, diamond, and even some challenger players, which does not include myself, my own peak is only master, is that it's not applicable that you can just pick Lee in every game and just smash your head on the keyboard, which is not true, by the way, in my opinion. Let me just start with this sort of color scheme idea. So the idea is that according to LS, he can compare champions to the sort of Magic the Gathering card color type thingy. I don't really know a lot about Magic the Gathering, but I did play some Hearthstone. And I know that in card games you have different options to play. You have cards that give you an advantage early, you have cards that you want to draw as late as possible in some decks, and this can apply to League of Legends in a sort of way. This is his general philosophy on champion types and draft. So basically he says that a Braum, for example, has some early aggression in his kit, like his Q and his passive when he's paired with Lucian on bot lane. It's a really strong bot lane for all ins. I think everyone who played combat at one point on bot lane knows that. But Braum also has this sort of white element, which means that he can neutralize a lot of abilities, like let it be Ornn R, let it be Ezreal R. He can neutralize a lot of abilities with his shield on E. And he's also fairly tanky and can serve as frontline, so he also has some type of green in it. LS displays this here in circling some colors with his pen as well. Those sort of comps are full on red in his opinion, because Renekton is lane dominant, she's dominant in the early game. These comps can work. They are really strong if you don't make mistakes once you get ahead. But history has shown that a lot of people make mistakes. A lot of people throw their leads. A lot of people get caught out of position. So the ideal way of play is to factor mistakes into your draft preparation, into your game preparation, and to just adapt, try to play non-interactive, and try to play very objective focused, and you will probably have more success than in the long term, in the long run, than just cheesing with those early comps. A lot of people will disagree. A lot of people will say, this is the right way to play. You should just play complete early game champions that are strong in lane, because you can just stomp lane in all 3 lanes, and your jungler can also perma invade. And this might be true. This might be true that those comps can like work really well in best of ones or something. But for series where you can adapt in picks, you can really do a lot against these sort of comps that can cheese you single games, like in best of 3s or best of 5s. And that's also the reason I think why LCK and LPL have a certain advantage over NA or EU, because it's best of 1 format and we don't get a lot of draft adaptation in our regions. So when GP was meta, he was a very big fan of him being blinded on R1, because paired with Gragas, because it neutralizes a lot of early game power from, for example, the Jarvan here. And when you look at LS tier lists, all the champions there are either enchanters right now, or champions on mid lane that can give you a lot of lane prio matched with farming junglers. He's a very big fan of farming junglers who can full sequence their camps, and you can see that his whole philosophy is about putting, or his favorite way of drafting is putting a farming jungler in the jungle, taking a high prio mid that can also be flexed in the ideal scenario, and also counter picking. Counter picking support and mid is his best bet since a lot of years. In this video, where he takes a take, or has a take on TSM's draft Dystopias, he also mentions the same sort of scheme. You can see here that he wants to R1 Renekton. Let's not factor team names in here. He wants to R1 GP. I said Renekton, right? GP. And you have a lot of high range with Varus and Kindred. Enemy team can't really walk into you. You have, for example, the Ornn E. You have Xayah, who ideally wants to, poke with her feathers and play front to back, and Rakan, who wants to either go in or mitigate and engage. But this comp already outranges with the first 3 champions. And then he recommends Zyra or any other range support. However, those comps, many would argue, are very volatile in to engage. So they would say, this is also volatile to Ornn and Rakan. But this is not the point LS makes in his philosophy, in my opinion. I mean, the champions that are meta are often defined by the items, right? By the items people go, and by runes that are usually meta. And right now, a lot of people just take cookies and time warp tonic and just don't lane at all. And this can be punished, but no one punishes it because no one is trying new things out. This is a problem because the game is moving in circles. One champion is told to counter the other since many years. Take botlane as an example. There was a Jinx meta. No one tried to play mages, so the Jinx meta stayed a ton of time, and Aphelios was considered the only counter in early season this year. But this is slowly shifting due to partially placebo nerfs or like real nerfs and changes to other champions. And there are always champions in the ADC role, for example, that stay under the radar. This is a problem because the meta is basically circling. Right, so you have, for example, Jinx, you have Varus, and then you have Ashe and maybe Jhin, and then you have on the other side again the lane bullies like Lucian or Draven, right? And then Jinx is good again against those champions, and you see the meta is always like shifting, right, in a circle, sort of. It can go both directions. And no one tries to break the meta with mages, for example, because no one plays mages in solo queue, and this transpires into competitive play. And this is not a good thing because it makes the meta really stale over a large portion of time. A fix for that could be drafting in a similar way that LS proposes, with blinding things that can be blinded really well and things that can slot in really well against certain comps. For example, if you have a lot of dashes on the enemy team, Poppy is a really good counter. If you have a lot of range on the enemy team and they don't necessarily have Kindred who can make everyone invincible, Nocturne might be a good pick if they're all squishy. And the list from champions that are hyper specific and can be slotted in later portions of the draft goes on and on, because currently we have over 159 champions in the game, so there are almost endless possibilities concerning this. When we go back to the color schemes, obviously I don't blame a team for going this full early route if it fits the team's playstyle, if the team is really good at team fighting, for example. But this has to be taken into account when it comes to player preparation, because there might also be scaling champs who are really good individual lane counters to certain champions on the enemy team. So, for example, in the team where I'm coaching and analyzing right now, we have a really good Cyan player, right? We have a really good Cyan player. So we slot Cyan the first three picks every early champ select, which might not be ideal, but no one can answer on his Cyan because the level of play is not high enough. And the same can be argued in higher leagues like LEC or LCS, or I mean, I put it in brackets, but in LCK or LPL, the same is done. People are basically just handshaking AD carries on the first rotations, or people are just handshaking supports, or people are just first picking Ari right now mid lane, which is mind blowing actually, because there's so much you can do against Ari. I mean, take this for example, or take this for example. Like, no one plays Lissandra right now. Like, not a lot of people, at least. You don't see it in a lot of competitive games, and this is just mind blowing to me. People are resorting to comfort, which is necessarily not a bad thing, but you have to weigh out the options, right? You have like 50% in a good draft is you pick champions that are comfortable for your players, and the other 50% is well, you have champions who are good for the draft in general and for countering enemy comp. And right now, we don't consider ourselves to be the best players, for example, in third division of Prem League, but we just draft way better than our opponent because they just pick champions where like that they feel like playing, and this is not the way to draft correctly. For example, if they open with a lot of dash champions, I said Poppy is an answer. I said Nocturne is an answer. Cyan can neutralize a lot of lane because Cyan is like green and white, but he also has this red component where he can just push enemies to side lanes and split push, which is really useful. So Cyan has like a lot of different modes because his kit is so versatile. He has health scaling on his W. He has his ult that can get him over the map relatively fast. It can also push turrets really fast. This champion has a lot of modes. And here we come again. We come back to the philosophy. LS is the same. He has the same opinion that, for example, GP. He doesn't have the strongest early game, of course. He can be countered by champions that can dash onto him and gap close. I won't name like more than maybe Fiora, Camille. There's a lot more. There's maybe even Lucian on top if the draft allows it. But this is important because you want to pick champions that can be flexed first. You have the flex potential, right? You have the flex potential. More than one of your players has to be able to play that champion. So this is hyper conditional already in the state that League is in right now. Many people just one-trick champions to Challenger or Grandmaster. Many people just play two or three champions in general, and they might not even be flexible in the role they're playing them in. This is a huge problem. This to me means that the future of League of Legends has not been achieved yet. Or it will probably maybe never be achieved, but this is such a pity, because you could flex. I mean, G2 showed it in 2019, and they one could argue they were a nice team on a macro scale. They could play really well macro and really good macro, and they were drawing the enemy to the side lanes. They had this really specific way of playing, where they had the map here, and people could they would pressure here, and they would like short shift their lanes constantly. They had such a unique playstyle the Asian teams could not react to, except FPX, who ironically picked scaling in the 3-0 they did in the finals in 2019. It's ironic. It's really ironic, because it's a Chinese team and they win against G2 with scaling. Now coming back to this, many people are just. I mean, one flex that is done a lot right now is, for example, Karma, right? But this is so stale because Karma also has a lot of answers against her, but no one picks them. Like Karma is very prone to poke, like Xera, for example, or any other high range champion, Ziggs, for example. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is really weird that it's done still, because all you see right now is champions like this in competitive, because people think it's easier to execute, but people don't invest the time to learn actual proper champions that can mitigate or neutralize people. The people I've seen that do the most are top laners, maybe, who play Cho'Gath or Sion, because they know how to neutralize matchups in their lane, or mid laners who play, for example, Galio or Lissandra, or yeah, stuff like that, or Victor or Corki. Those things sort of fall into the category, but they have answers as well to them, but no one breaks up the meta. Corki and Victor are just handshaked all season. Jinx and Aphelios are handshaked all season. Seri is out, for example. I mean, Seri got nerfed and she's quite balanced right now, I think. But I mean, she's not balanced if you get her through laning phase, but her laning phase is not the strongest. And her late game is also might struggle against higher range crit ADCs. Yeah, but for example, no one. I mean, Draven, he takes a lot of games to master this champion, right? It takes a lot of games. No one slots him into drafts because no one plays him, but this champion might be broken in solo lanes as well as bot lane. So this champion might just straight up be flexible. And people are slowly starting to realize that Tryndamere, for example, can be picked in early rotation because he has basically no lane counters to him, which is actually mind blowing as well. So this is the general draft philosophy of LS. He thinks of champions in certain themes and variables they can be slotted into. For example, Braum or Lucian or Jarvan here. Lucian, Jarvan in red, Braum red, and white red. So you have frontline. I mean, the basic split up of team compositions is you want one or two frontline champions, and the rest is adapted inside of draft, right? Except you have like confidence blinds from your players. And if you look at comps that are played right now, this game is from 18th of March in 2022. People are just handshaking engaged supports on early picks. This Kindred pick might actually not be bad from IG here, but you see in LPL, which is like the second best league, people are actually drafting not that badly. People are actually drafting neutralizing picks like Orianna and Sion. And those teams are the teams that have success right now. So this might actually be the direction that League is heading into. But the comps are still not really thematically aligning. So you have this kind of good bot lane, right? But the bot lane is basically handshook. What if you take like Ziggs here, right? I mean, one could argue that you're lacking 80 damage, but do you have to pick Ori then? Can't you pick something else that's more auto-based? Is Ryze not bad against like things that are auto-based? Can't they just generate prio? What about a farming jungler? Why do you have to pick Viego? I mean, Viego can be really strong as well. I'm not generally criticizing the draft, but you can see where I'm coming from here. Like Jace might be an individual lane counter to Sion, but Sion can just try to survive lane and they will be 8 times more useful. I mean, let's see how the game plays out and how it ends, but yeah, you can see that the red team wins, surprisingly. Because they just have Kindred who builds Collector against 3 champions who can build armor, which they, by the way, don't because they prefer CDR boots, but it's whatever. And if you look at LCK in comparison, for example, I mean, they sometimes do really good stuff. Like, they sometimes slot Gragas in, and T1 here also does kinda nice draft with double range on bot lane, Enchanter support, they blind Tryndamere. They have some really good ideas generally about how the game should be played. They play with farming jungle as well. Like, T1 is the future of League right now. They are drafting in a similar way to this philosophy, coincidentally, and this is really nice to see. They are just handshaking Ari, for example. Renata is only good, in my opinion, into comps that are really high auto-based and champions that want to come into you and then can DPS each other if they're hit by her ult. And Aphelios is like, I mean, yeah, he's strong and early, but he wants to snowball, right? So if this lane just neutralizes him, he's basically useless. And combine this with T1's already very fast-paced macro, and this team has no chance of winning, actually. But players still do mistakes sometimes. But you can see the game is really fast-paced, snowballing. And T1 always does this thing where they put the Herald on bot lane for Gumayushi to open the map and then be able to rotate on mid, be able to take all the outer turrets, and their comps always allow it, because Hecarim can just always sequence. I'm not a supporter of this build, but you need frontline in this game, so it's not that bad, I suppose. But you see where this is coming from. So you have champions that can outrange and neutralize the enemy, and you've already gained a draft advantage. I'm not a big fan of the Kaiser because it takes a lot of time to scale, but it's really strong in the later stages, obviously, and you have a really high value in poke and range here. And here you have two champions who want to go in. You have one neutralizer, so the theme is already not. I mean, you have two neutralizers, but the theme is already not aligning, right? You have two neutralizing champions. You have two champions that want to go in, and you have Aphelios, who's like good at champions who are diving in, but he's not that good at peeling himself against poke, right? So he's prone to poke. So you have one champion who's countered by three champions on the enemy team with high range in the later stages. And you have this champion who wants to dash in, this champion who wants to dash in. You see the comp is not aligning in an ideal setting. And players will make mistakes, so I would much rather have this draft that prevents me from losing the game of one single little mistake, right? I mean, T1 doesn't have to worry about it because their players are good enough to cleanly snowball games, usually. But you see that they lose 3 Drakes in this game, but they still somehow managed to win the game in the later stages. I mean, here the game is 25 minutes long. As I said, I won't be going into too much detail this game about certain champions and matchups, but this is the general idea, right? You see, in the later stages, they even win they even win teamfights against Soul. It's so crazy. It's actually mind-blowing. They give the enemy Soul, and their comp is so good that they can still win the game. This is what good drafting means. This is what LS is talking about. This is not what people lay into his mouth. The words they lay into his mouth, like, you have to play perfectly. Scaling is the way to go. No, yes, scaling is really good. Scaling is really good if you have enablers. The enabling factor in this game is that the players are good enough to survive the lane. Other teams might not be good enough to survive the early game against hyper aggression comps. This comp obviously doesn't fit that well in together, but let's say there was, I don't know, Renekton instead of Gragas. Let's say, I mean, Aphelios can stay. Let's say there's also an engaged support, right? They might have a harder time if this team actually knew how to invade their bot side and correctly snowball the game, right? But it doesn't matter if the players just understand the goal of their comp, which is to just scale and chill, and the enemies have to play their hearts out to actually win the game. I mean, yeah, this is what some would call a very boring style to play, but in my view, it's the correct style to play because, I mean, you're calculating for enemies' mistakes, you're calculating for your own mistakes before the game, and you're making it way easier to play the game, right? And I mean, T1 ends up losing this game, but you see how close it was, right? The game was actually 40 minutes long. It's actually crazy, and the enemy only is able to win through Soul. And this is how T1 is 18-0 right now in series. I mean, they might lose single games to comps like this because the level of play is so high in Korea. But if you draft like this, I promise you, if you draft like this in EU or NA, you're easily gonna be able to win the split with the right players. I mean, this might sound delusional to some people, but it's actually the way to go. And the way you can also prevent a lot of fizz from these early aggression red comps that people pick is to just opt into resolve on a lot of champions. For example, Veiga mid can like second opt into resolve in certain dive matchups and go and build crown. So obviously items as well as runes can enable you to even strengthen your draft to be a scaling draft. Like you know, you also have Gathering Storm, right? These two. Like you have this, for example, on Jinx. You can like go this on Jinx. You can go this on Jinx. This against like high poke champions, and this against if you just want to scale, and it will be much stronger than, for example, this. This I would only take in hard lanes, right? There's merit, there's reason for this. Like you can go this, but only it's only good against really hard lanes where you need the mana and the sustain to wave clear and keep up in CS. Otherwise, people just way overuse this. And this is, by the way, generally, I think this is just not good. Even if the enemy has full squishy comps. I mean, the damage value might not vary that much that you get from it, but these two are just very, very superior in a lot of cases. And what we need is a lot of people who do the math behind it, because I'm not a mathematician. A professional mathematician. I mean, everybody can do the math, but it's a lot of work, obviously. And what analysts and teams need to do is they need to calculate. They need to calculate the values of these runes so their players don't take the wrong runes. This is not happening right now. The future of League depends on people being willing to innovate, to learn, and to risk something. Innovate, learn, and risk. Otherwise, they don't learn. They won't learn. Solo queue is in such a bad state right now that people will just play super brain-dead aggression, and it will transpire into competitive play. And competitive play will, over the long run, deteriorate, no matter how much money will be pumped into it from sponsors. People need to understand that scaling is good if it has setup, right? So you can pick the Lee Sin, you can pick the Nautilus on bot lane if you have a right game plan. You can't just put random pieces that are good in like the Koreans do, and they've won worlds many times with this strat. You have to actually think about it if you want to beat the Koreans or the Asians in their own game. I mean, you have to suppress them in draft. You won't beat someone who plays 2,000 games a season in high challenger Korea by just copying the champion they play, the runes they play, and try to smash their head in lane. I mean, this rarely works. You see it. The only Western teams that have had success from EU, for example, are Fnatic and G2, right? If we're gonna do result-based analysis. And Fnatic was just mechanically very gifted until the finals, and G2 was also macro gifted. Like their macro was really good. They were very, very good innovators. They learned a lot, and they had very versatile macro. Very versatile macro. So this should be it for now. If you have any questions for champion colors and you want to discuss some of those themes with me, I mean, I've not gotten way into in-depth. I'll link the videos of LS here, so you can maybe get an own picture about certain champion themes and the colors certain champions have and how they can be slotted into draft. And let's have a discussion about it. I don't think that one should always say, this is objectively wrong, this is objectively right. But I think we should have a discussion about it to move the game forward. This is my main goal as a coach and as a player. I want to be in an environment where we can actually learn and innovate without being made fun of for it. just because people are so stubborn and always play the same stuff. And sometimes I also get really emotional about it, because it's just frustrating to see the same stuff or the same mistakes over and over again, right? So let's work together for a better environment and better drafts. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll probably see you in the next one. And I very much appreciate every feedback I can get. Thank you.